The sun was setting over Los Angeles, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. The city buzzed with its usual chaos, cars honking, sirens wailing in the distance, people rushing through the streets, lost in their daily grind. But inside a dimly lit boxing gym on the east side, the only sound was the rhythmic thud of gloved fists hitting a heavy bag. Mike Tyson, the living legend of boxing, was finishing his final round. His sweat-drenched shirt clung to his massive frame, each punch landing with the force of a freight train. Even in his 50s, Mike's power was terrifying. His knuckles, worn and scarred from decades in the ring, were still capable of shattering bone. "Time!" barked his trainer, Ricky. Mike dropped his gloves, his chest heaving. But his mind wasn't on the workout. It was on Layla, his 12-year-old daughter. The thought of her brought a rare softness to his hardened face. Layla was his heart, his reason for walking the straight path after a tumultuous life of fights, fame, and mistakes. He grabbed his phone and saw her name pop up on the screen, Layla Hart, and immediately answered. "Hey, baby girl, I'm just finishing up." "You still at the park?" he asked, a smile spreading across his face. "Yeah, Daddy, I'm sitting on the bench near the fountain. I drew you something." Her voice was filled with excitement. Mike chuckled, wiping sweat from his brow. "I can't wait to see it, Princess. I'm heading there now." "Okay, love you?" "Love you more," he replied, his heart full. He tossed his gloves aside and grabbed his keys, eager to get to her. But across town, hidden in the shadows, someone else had been watching Layla. Layla sat on the park bench, her sketchbook balanced on her lap. Her long, curly hair bounced as she swayed side to side, completely absorbed in her drawing. Around her, families picnicked, kids played on swings, and couples strolled by hand in hand. It was a peaceful scene, on the surface. But behind a blacked-out van parked across the street, 4 men sat inside, their eyes fixed on the girl. "Is that her?" muttered one of them, peering through binoculars. "Yeah," replied the leader, a grizzled man with a jagged scar down his cheek. His name was Vincent. He'd been in and out of the underworld for decades, drug deals, kidnappings, and worse. But this job, it was personal. "You really think messing with Tyson's kid is a good idea?" asked one of the younger thugs, his voice shaky. Vincent glared at him, his eyes cold. "You got no idea who he is to me. This isn't just about the money. It's about sending a message." The engine idled as they watched Layla flip through her sketchbook, completely unaware of the danger creeping closer. "All right, masks on," Vincent ordered. In an instant, the men donned black ski masks. The sliding van door opened silently as 2 of them stepped out, moving swiftly but unnoticed through the shadows. Layla, still drawing, hummed a tune softly. She didn't hear the footsteps behind her, didn't notice the looming shadow until it was too late. A gloved hand clamped over her mouth, stifling her scream. "Shh! Don't fight, girl!" one of the kidnappers hissed into her ear, his grip tightening around her tiny frame. Layla kicked and thrashed, trying to break free, her sketchbook flying to the ground. But the second man grabbed her legs, lifting her off the bench. Her phone slipped from her jacket pocket and tumbled onto the sidewalk. Mike was still on the call, driving towards the park, when he heard the muffled sounds. At first, he thought it was nothing, just background noise. But then Layla's faint, stifled cries came through. "Layla? Baby? What's going on?" He barked into the phone, his heart pounding. There was a harsh scraping sound, her phone skittering across the ground, and then nothing. The call cut off, leaving Mike in deafening silence. His hands clenched the steering wheel, knuckles white with panic. He slammed the brakes, his tires screeching to a halt in the middle of the road. His mind raced, his body filled with a terror deeper than anything he'd ever felt in the ring. "Layla!" he roared, punching the dashboard. He frantically hit redial, but all he got was a hollow, repetitive beep. Call failed. The van roared down side streets, weaving through alleys and back roads to avoid detection. Inside, Layla struggled against her restraints, her eyes filled with tears. But there was a fire behind them, a spark inherited from her father. Her hands were tied, but she kicked at the walls, refusing to give in to fear. Vincent sat beside her, grinning under his mask. "You're a fighter, just like your old man." Layla glared at him. He's going to find you, and when he does… Vincent laughed cruelly. That's the plan, sweetheart. Back in his car, Mike's phone buzzed violently in his hand. An unknown number flashed across the screen. His heart pounded as he answered. Layla? He shouted, but the voice on the other end wasn't hers. It was cold, cruel, and dripping with venom. Mike Tyson, I've been waiting to talk to you. Mike's jaw clenched, his breathing ragged. Where's my daughter? He growled. Vincent chuckled, the sound like nails on a chalkboard. She's safe, for now. But if you want her to stay that way, you better listen closely. Mike's mind raced. He knew this game, the manipulation, the threats, but nothing could prepare him for the thought of losing Layla. You have no idea what you've just done, Mike said, his voice low and seething. Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing, Vincent replied. You took everything from me years ago. This is just payback. Mike's fists trembled with rage. Memories flooded back. Fights in underground rings, debts paid in blood, old enemies resurfacing. He had tried to leave that life behind, but it had clawed its way back. I'm coming for her, Mike whispered through gritted teeth. Vincent laughed darkly. Good. Let's see if you still got that killer instinct. The line went dead. Mike's hands slammed against the steering wheel. He could feel his heart beating like a war drum in his chest, adrenaline coursing through his veins. But amid the rage and panic, a singular focus emerged. He would stop at nothing to get Layla back. He yanked his phone out again, dialing an old number, a man he hadn't spoken to in years, someone deep in the criminal underworld. It's Mike, he said when the man answered. A pause. I figured this day would come. I need information, now. What's the target? A black van, 4 men, and they have my daughter. The man on the other end whistled low. Jesus, Mike, that's heavy. I don't care how much it costs. Find them. The call ended. Mike floored the gas pedal, his car roaring down the road like a beast unleashed. His mind was a storm of emotions, fear, rage, desperation, but above all, there was a promise. I will bring you home, Layla, no matter what it takes. Mike Tyson, The Relentless Hunt, Chapters 4 to 6. Chapter 4, Into the Lion's Den. The Los Angeles skyline blurred past Mike Tyson as he pressed the gas pedal to the floor. His car roared down the freeway like a beast unleashed. Every second that ticked by was another second Layla was in danger, and that thought was driving him mad. His phone buzzed in the passenger seat, displaying a text from the contact he had called earlier. Black van sighted, headed toward the East Side Industrial District. Old warehouse at Bay 47. Be careful, this crew's dangerous. Mike's grip tightened on the wheel. He didn't need the warning. He knew the kind of men he was dealing with. He'd fought them before, in underground rings, backroom deals, and the dark alleys of his past. They were the kind of men who didn't care about life, who saw children as pawns. And they had his daughter. He turned hard off the freeway, tires screeching as he swerved into the industrial district, a maze of rusting warehouses, decaying factories, and broken-down shipping yards. It was the perfect place for scum like them to hide. Mike pulled his car into an alley, cutting the headlights. In the distance, the shape of a large black van was parked outside a derelict warehouse, its side door still open. 2 men stood guard, casually smoking, guns hanging loosely by their sides. Mike reached into his glove compartment and pulled out a pair of black gloves. He slipped them on, his knuckles cracking beneath the leather. It was time. The night air was heavy, filled with the distant hum of machinery and the occasional howl of a stray dog. Mike crept silently along the shadows, moving like a panther stalking its prey. His mind was laser-focused, every step calculated, every breath controlled. He crouched behind a stack of rusty barrels, observing the 2 guards. One of them turned his back, taking a long drag from his cigarette. That was the opening. Mike lunged forward, moving silently but swiftly. His left arm wrapped around the first guard's neck in a vice-like grip, cutting off his air before the man could even cry out. The other guard barely had time to turn before Mike swung his fist like a wrecking ball, landing a brutal uppercut to the man's jaw. The crack of bone echoed into the night as the second guard crumpled to the ground. Mike dragged the unconscious bodies into the shadows, making sure they were out of sight. He crouched near the van and peered inside. Empty. No Layla. His heart pounded harder. She was still inside. He made his way to the warehouse's entrance, where a heavy metal door stood slightly ajar. He pushed it open, the rusty hinges groaning. Inside, the warehouse was vast and dimly lit. Old machinery sat in disrepair, and wooden crates were stacked high, creating a maze of shadows. Mike's ears picked up faint noises, a muffled voice followed by a sinister laugh. He followed the sounds, moving through the labyrinth of crates. Peering around a corner, he saw them. Layla was tied to a chair, her wrists and ankles bound tightly with rope. Her face was smeared with dirt, but her spirit was unbroken. She glared at the men around her, tears threatening to fall but held back by sheer determination. Vincent, the scarred leader, paced in front of her, a twisted grin on his face. "You know, kid, you've got guts," Vincent sneered. "I can see where you get it from. Your dad's got a reputation, toughest fighter on the planet. But even tough guys bleed." Layla spat at his feet. "My dad's coming. You're dead." Vincent laughed cruelly. "Oh, I'm counting on it." Mike's blood boiled. Seeing Layla in that chair, hearing her defiance, sparked a fire within him like never before. But he had to be smart. One wrong move and she'd be in even more danger. He scanned the area. There were 4 more men inside. 2 of them leaned against a stack of crates, rifles slung across their chests. Another patrolled the far end of the warehouse while the last one stood behind Layla, knife in hand. Mike's mind raced. He needed a distraction. He picked up a loose metal pipe from the ground and hurled it into the shadows across the room. It clattered loudly, the echo reverberating through the warehouse. "What was that?" one of the guards barked. "Go check it out," Vincent ordered. 2 of the guards moved towards the noise, leaving Vincent and the knife-wielding thug near Layla. Mike seized the moment. Moving like a ghost, Mike closed the distance between him and the first remaining guard. Before the man could react, Mike grabbed him by the collar, spun him around, and delivered a devastating headbutt. The thug crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Vincent spun around, gun drawn, but Mike was faster. He grabbed a crate and hurled it at Vincent with superhuman strength, knocking the gun out of his hand and sending him sprawling. The thug holding the knife lunged at Layla, but Mike was already there. With lightning-fast reflexes, he grabbed the man's wrist mid-swing, twisting it until the knife clattered to the floor. The thug screamed in pain, but Mike didn't hesitate. He slammed his fist into the man's temple, knocking him out cold. Layla gasped, tears welling in her eyes. "Daddy!" Mike rushed to her side, quickly untying the ropes. "It's okay, baby, I'm here." But before they could embrace, a gunshot rang out. A bullet ricocheted off the metal wall inches from Mike's head. Vincent had recovered, blood dripping from his forehead, gun back in hand. "I knew you'd come, Tyson," he snarled, "but you're not leaving here alive." Mike stood in front of Layla, shielding her with his body. "You messed with the wrong family." Vincent fired again, but Mike dove behind a stack of crates, pulling Layla with him. The warehouse erupted into chaos. The remaining guards, alerted by the gunfire, stormed back in, guns blazing. Bullets tore through the air, splintering wood and sending debris flying. Mike moved with precision, using his surroundings to his advantage. He grabbed a metal rod and hurled it like a spear, impaling one of the guards through the shoulder, knocking him out of the fight. Another guard lunged at Mike with a crowbar, but Mike sidestepped and delivered a brutal punch to the man's ribs, hearing them crack under the force. Vincent, realizing he was losing control, grabbed Layla, pulling her towards him with a knife pressed to her throat. "Back off, Tyson, or she dies." Mike froze, his fists clenched, sweat pouring down his face. His heart pounded, but his mind stayed clear. He had faced life-or-death situations before, but nothing compared to this. "Let her go, Vincent. This is between you and me," Mike growled. Vincent laughed bitterly. "That's the thing, Mike. It's always been about you." In a split-second decision, Mike grabbed a loose brick from the floor and hurled it at Vincent's hand. The impact knocked the knife away, and before Vincent could react, Mike was on him. He tackled Vincent to the ground, fists flying in a brutal flurry. Each punch echoed through the warehouse, years of rage and pain pouring into every blow. Vincent fought back, but he was no match for Mike Tyson in full fury. With one final devastating punch, Mike sent Vincent's head crashing into the concrete floor, knocking him out cold. Silence filled the warehouse. Mike stood, breathing heavily, blood on his knuckles, but victorious. He turned to Layla, who ran into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "I knew you'd come, Daddy," she cried. Mike held her tight, his own tears falling. "I'll always come for you. Always." The distant sound of sirens grew louder, approaching fast. Mike picked Layla up, carrying her towards the exit as the first police cars arrived, their flashing lights illuminating the wreckage. An officer approached, wide-eyed at the scene. What the hell happened here? Mike, still holding Layla, looked back at the unconscious bodies scattered around. He smirked. They messed with the wrong guy. And with that, Mike carried his daughter into the night, knowing nothing would ever come between them again. Mike Tyson, The Relentless Hunt. Chapters 7 to 9. The warehouse echoed with silence, broken only by the distant wail of sirens. Mike Tyson stood over Vincent's unconscious body, his chest heaving, blood dripping from his knuckles. His daughter, Layla, clung tightly to his side, her tear-streaked face buried against his shirt. But it wasn't over yet. The sounds of groaning filled the space. One of the surviving gang members stirred, crawling behind a stack of crates, reaching for a pistol that had fallen during the chaos. Mike's senses were sharp, his instincts honed from years in the ring. He caught the glint of metal in the corner of his eye. "Layla, get down!" he roared. Without hesitation, Mike lunged forward just as the thug aimed the pistol. Time seemed to slow as the man pulled the trigger. Bang! The bullet whizzed past Mike's shoulder, grazing his arm, but he didn't stop. Like a freight train, Mike slammed into the thug, knocking the gun from his hand. He pinned the man to the ground with one knee, his bloodied fists clenched. "Please, please!" the thug whimpered, his face pale with fear. Mike's eyes were burning with rage. "You pointed a gun at my daughter." The thug shook his head frantically. "It wasn't personal. I was just following orders." Mike's fist hovered in the air, trembling. He wanted to end it right there, but Layla's voice cut through the haze. "Daddy, don't." Mike hesitated, his heart torn between vengeance and mercy. He looked down at the thug, who cowered beneath him, and then back at Layla. Her big brown eyes, filled with fear yet compassion, locked with his. Mike's chest heaved as he stood up, yanking the thug to his feet and slamming him against a steel pillar. "You're lucky she's here," Mike growled. "Now get the hell out of my sight before I change my mind." The thug scrambled away, limping, disappearing into the shadows. Mike staggered back toward Layla, gripping his wounded arm. Blood dripped down to his elbow, but he barely noticed. The adrenaline coursing through his veins drowned out the pain. "Daddy, you're bleeding," Layla gasped. Mike forced a weak smile, crouching down to her level. "I'm okay, baby. It's just a scratch." The sirens grew louder, red and blue lights flashing through the shattered windows. LAPD cruisers screeched to a halt outside, doors flying open as officers stormed in, weapons drawn. "Drop the weapon!" one of the officers barked. Mike raised his hands, shielding Layla behind him. "I'm unarmed. I'm the one who called it in." The lead officer, a grizzled man with silver streaks in his beard, took in the scene. Unconscious thugs strewn across the floor, shattered crates, bullet casings scattered everywhere. "What the hell happened here?" the officer muttered. Mike stood tall, blood still dripping from his fist. "They took my daughter. I got her back." The officer blinked, stunned. "You did this? Alone?" Mike nodded. The officer let out a low whistle. "Jesus Christ, remind me never to piss you off." The aftermath was a blur. Paramedics swarmed the warehouse, patching Mike's wounds, checking Layla for injuries. She was physically unharmed, but her small body trembled from the emotional weight of the ordeal. Mike sat on the back of an ambulance, his arm wrapped in a bloodied bandage. Layla sat beside him, clutching a blanket the paramedics had given her. She leaned against him, her head resting on his broad shoulder. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice quivering. I was so scared. Mike wrapped his arm around her, holding her tightly. I know, baby, but you were so brave. She looked up at him with wide, tear-filled eyes. I knew you'd come. His throat tightened as he fought back his own tears. Nothing in this world could have stopped me. There was a pause, filled with the quiet hum of distant sirens and the muffled voices of police officers interviewing witnesses. Layla then asked the question that had been weighing on her heart. Why did they do this? Why would anyone want to hurt us? Mike sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. It was the kind of question no father wanted to answer. There are bad people out there, Layla. People who think they can take what they want, hurt who they want, and never face the consequences. He glanced at her, his eyes filled with pain. But it's our job to stand up to them, to fight for what's right. Layla clutched his hand tighter. Like you did, he nodded. Exactly like I did. The officer from earlier approached them, a softer expression on his face now that the chaos had subsided. Mr. Tyson, he began, we've rounded up the thugs you left conscious enough to arrest. Vincent, the leader, is still out cold. He'll be spending the rest of his life behind bars. Mike gave a curt nod. Good. The officer hesitated for a moment before continuing. I've seen a lot of things in my time on the force, but I've never seen anyone do what you just did. You saved your daughter, and probably stopped these guys from hurting anyone else. Mike's jaw tensed. I didn't have a choice. The officer nodded respectfully. You did the right thing. You're a hero. But Mike didn't feel like a hero. He looked down at Layla, who was now sleeping against his side, exhaustion finally taking over. She's the real hero, Mike whispered. She never gave up. The next morning, Mike sat on the edge of Layla's bed, watching her sleep peacefully for the first time in what felt like an eternity. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, illuminating her face. Her chest rose and fell with each soft breath, her innocence restored, at least for now. He gently brushed a stray curl away from her forehead and kissed it. Layla stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Daddy? I'm here, baby, he whispered. A small smile spread across her face. We're safe now. Mike nodded. We are. There was a moment of silence between them, the unspoken bond of what they had just survived lingering in the air. Daddy? She asked hesitantly. Yeah? She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. You were so strong last night. You weren't scared at all. Mike chuckled softly, though his heart ached. Oh, I was scared. More scared than I've ever been. But you didn't show it, he smiled. Because I had to be strong for you. That's what dads do. Layla thought for a moment before whispering, I want to be strong too. Mike's eyes filled with pride. You already are. You were brave when it mattered most. She sat up, wrapping her small arms around his neck. Thank you for saving me. He held her close, tears slipping down his cheeks. You're my everything, Layla. I'd go through hell for you. They sat there in the quiet morning, the nightmare behind them, but the scars still fresh. Mike knew that this wouldn't be something they could just forget. Layla would carry the memory of that night with her, as would he. But they would face it together, as a family. And as the sun rose higher in the sky, Mike made a silent promise. No one would ever hurt his daughter again. Not while he was still breathing. Because in the end, no opponent in the ring could compare to the love of a father for his child. And that love? It was the strongest force in the world. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, so you won't miss out on more thrilling stories. Drop a comment below with your thoughts and share this story with those who need to hear it. Turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our latest videos. See you in the next exciting and meaningful story.